Hello, welcome back to Pitt Resource Connection. I'm Mary Smith, your host, and we have Dr. Suzanne from ECU, and it's the Department of Public Health, right?
Correct.
I got it right. Okay. And so you've been working on a new project over there, a research project, correct?
Correct.
What is it?
Yeah, so we are working on the Disaster Resiliency Project in the Department of Public Health at the Brady School of Medicine. And the project really is trying to understand what it means to recover from a hurricane. And we want to do that through what's called understanding resiliency and individual resiliency that's related to recovery from flooding and a hurricane.
And we're pretty familiar with hurricanes and flooding around these parts, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
We've had a few of those, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So how are you studying this? What are you doing?
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're inviting community members who have experienced either Hurricane Floyd or Hurricane Matthew to participate in a listening session or focus group to learn about individual experiences as they've undergone recovery from Hurricane Matthew or Hurricane Floyd. So we're conducting focus groups, and we have a methodology that follows a focus group guide to really learn their stories and perspectives about what they've experienced in terms of trying to recover from a hurricane.
And that can be very traumatic, because especially if you lose everything.
Absolutely.
Everything. I mean, not just this or that, but everything you've worked hard for is gone.
Yes, and we've been learning from our participants so far about the anguish and about the distress from losing childhood photo albums, gifts from your children, the real emotional touches that the flooding impacts on, but then also just the practical things like no dishwasher, no washing machine,
No car,
no front steps to get into the house. So, you know, it really runs the gamut, these impacts that people have experienced, and it's been very enriching to try to understand the story in a way that each person's experiences paint a picture overall of what it's like to be a hurricane survivor. And that's really what we want to understand more about from an individual level.
So why is this research important to us here in Pitt County?
Well, it's really important because we are experiencing hurricanes and flooding more frequently and more intensely over the last 2 decades. For example, the flood of the century, Hurricane Floyd, was supposed to happen basically between every 100 and 500 years. And then here comes along Hurricane Matthew, and in between we had some large hurricanes like Hurricane Irene that didn't do as much damage because of the flooding was minimal compared to Matthew, but we have this other major flooding event 17 years later, Hurricane Matthew. And so predictions from our weather experts indicate that we'll be experiencing more intense and more frequent hurricanes. And in Pitt County, that's important because we're surrounded by a lot of water, even though we are inland.
That's right.
And we have low-lying floodplains and low-lying farmland that flood, and when that water table gets saturated, there's no place for the water to go.
And it does it just when you get a hard rain. You can see the fields all flooded.
Yes.
You can't get in there.
Yeah, and of course in Greenville and some of the larger towns in the county have experienced significant growth, the stormwater management and the planning that's gone into developments has not been as robust as it could have been with stormwater management. So that's another thing that leads to flooding in the populated areas,
Right.
and to some degree. So why it's important to Pitt County is because this information will be provided to our leaders and decision makers to really help them understand what are the real community impacts of the people that are survivors that have tried to go on and live their lives in Pitt County after these devastating floods. So we really hope that it provides insight and recommendations. Community members have a lot of good information to share if you ask them.
That's right.
And so that's the other thing we're doing in our focus group is really asking the survivors what they recommend to our county leaders for planning for the next big event.
And they have insight, personal insight, which makes a big difference.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So once you get all this information, what are you going to do with it after that? You pull it together somehow or another?
Yeah, so actually, yes, there is a methodology in this process. Like any great science, it follows a rigid, structured format, and so our hope is to provide information that's extracted in what's called themes, and then those themes can be looked at in terms of program planning. And so we hope to formulate some concepts that could be further developed in program planning activities for the city and county. So really ultimately we hope to provide information that can be used for city and county planning related to emergency preparedness.
And I would think that from your focus groups and all that you would be getting emotional insights on the trauma response that the people went through, and would better the counselors in our area to how to respond, especially like right away, what to expect when you walk into this situation. Because I know that there are evidence-based trainings that are out there now just for that purpose, to train particularly people in shelters. There's a whole lot of going on in the shelter. And as we used to say back when I worked on a task force with emergency management, was a shelter isn't a five-star hotel by any stretch of the imagination.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're thrown in there with all these other people on a cot or on the floor, and that's very traumatic in its.
Yes, and absolutely, that is a whole other dimension of where this project can lead, is really into the psychosocial aspects of trauma and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because many of these families have latent traumatic stress. And while this project is not specifically health related in terms of designed to look at health questions and questions of coping, we are learning a lot about the personal experiences of coping and adaptation from a health point of view. And we hope to build on that as well. And certainly the resources here in Pitt County, Real Crisis, and some of those organizations that can help with redirecting the trauma in a positive way are so essential to community recovery as well.
Absolutely.
So I think the two aspects go hand in hand.
Okay, so let's get back to the focus groups now. Who do you want to participate? Does just anybody?
Well, we have to have adults over age 18, and also people who consider themselves survivors of Hurricane Floyd or Hurricane Matthew. They need to be residents of Pitt County and have lived in Pitt County at the time of Hurricane Floyd or Hurricane Matthew.
Okay. So, well, I had a question, but now it escapes me about that. I don't know what I was going to ask. Something popped in my brain really quick, and it just left as quickly, but that's okay. That's me.
Yeah.
So is it just for English speaking? Do you have Spanish speaking groups as well?
We would like to involve Spanish speakers in our focus groups. So if there's a Spanish group or family, community members that want to participate in our focus groups, we certainly encourage and welcome our Spanish community members.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you would have an interpreter or something there?
Right, yes, we have an interpreter and Spanish interview guide that can be adapted for the Spanish speaking community, yeah.
Okay, so how long are these focus groups going to take place? I mean, is there an end? Oh, I'm sure there's an end point.
Yeah. So we hope to have all of our focus groups completed by the end of February of 2018.
Okay. And how would I find out about the dates of when any of these focus groups are going to take place?
So we are in the planning process now of scheduling our next focus groups for 2018. And so you would call the phone number on the screen, 252-744-2629, and that phone number is to the project coordinator, Jasmine Hayes, and she will answer questions about the scheduling.
So when you get all this research done, how long is that going to take, do you think? A year, 6 months?
Well, we hope to have the information synthesized and report provided sometime by early June.
Okay, that would be great.
2018, yeah.
Yeah, I lived through both of the hurricanes, and the one thing that always stood out in my head during Floyd was we would sit out on our deck because we cooked on our grill because we had no power, and we could hear the Red Cross down in the center of town. They would beep this loud horn, and you'd hear hot meals are ready, hot over a loudspeaker, and it was just kind of very different. Thankfully we didn't have to worry about that, but they had set up a command center downtown and had all these people coming in. And the other thing that was always interesting to me that I never thought I would live to hear is my father-in-law lived with us and fell and broke his hip in the middle of Floyd. And I called 911 and they said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, we can't come to help you because we are plucking people off the top of roofs with all of our helicopters, and you are completely surrounded by water.
Yes.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I'm calling 911 and you can't. And then I had to think, if he was having a heart attack, he said they would dispatch a helicopter out there. But since it was a broken hip, we would have just to figure that out on our own. And that was very interesting thought process when I came back and I said, do you know that they said they couldn't come?
Yes.
That's not something you would ever dream you'd hear from 911.
Right.
And so there are a lot of, and I know that a lot of people in our town, lost everything. And thankful, God bless, that we didn't, have any, we just lost power. And so we learned then to get a generator, but a lot of people don't have those resources, and so we're just really happy that we did.
Yes, and Pitt County and the state as a whole have advanced significantly in their emergency preparedness for hurricanes and floodings. And Pitt County is a model across the state for preparation for hurricanes and flooding. And that's terrific to know that and understand it. And so we're really proud to learn about how Pitt County is really a model for the state in preparation for flooding. However, we also know that we can't anticipate and plan for everything.
That's right.
And so the little things that are shared in our focus groups are just ways that Pitt County leaders can just tweak a little more to improve a little more and really have the best outcome possible for our citizens.
Great. Well, thank you for your research. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you for coming in. If you all are interested in becoming part of a focus group to talk about your experiences and things that happened to you and your family that can help give insight to this whole project, give the Jasmine a call, and our information is on our screen, and they will tell you when the next focus group is. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, and thank you guys for watching the Pitt Resource Connection.